Okay, we'll go ahead and get started as folks roll in. Good morning. I am Andrew Griffin, Senior Vice President of Government Affairs here at the Maryland Chamber of Commerce. Thank you all for joining us today on a certainly very anticipated but very important webinar on the Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program. We are joined today by Secretary Wu, some members of the Family Division staff. At the Chamber, we get a lot of questions on this newly passed program. And obviously, as you all know, as Maryland businesses, a lot of what we do is advocacy. But on the other side of that is it's kind of our job to make sure you all know what's going on when we have big policy sea change. And so the family program certainly qualifies as that. And I think the questions we've received, we wanted to make sure the department had the opportunity to come and interact with you all and answer a lot of those questions. So I think today will be very informative. Before we get started, just a few quick housekeeping items. If you do have questions today, which I know many of you will have questions, please feel free to use the question and answer function for those. Once Department of Labor staff has kind of finished their presentation, we will answer as many of your questions as we can there. For those questions we do not get to, we will provide those to the department, but also I think we'll be providing contact information for follow-up as well for questions. Today's webinar will be recorded. We will post a recording and a link to that on our website later today. So if you missed a piece of it or you can't stay for the full hour, you can check back there. And so with that, I will kind of segue over to Secretary Wu. Thank you for joining us this morning for a quick intro. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Andrew. And I really want to thank the Chamber for hosting this discussion and for all of your partnership. We know that Family and Medical Leave Insurance in Maryland, or FAMLI, as we refer to it for short, it's a big undertaking. It's very exciting. We at the department firmly believe this will be good for Maryland's economy and businesses, but there are a lot of questions. And so we really appreciate the collaborative way that the Chamber and your members have approached us. We don't always agree. We may have a lot of questions that aren't answered, but we want to work with you to make sure this program is implemented smoothly and we address your questions and concerns. Just had a couple things I wanted to note at the top as we dive in here. First of all, we are excited because we believe that family is good for employers. Research shows that paid family and medical leave helps employers and businesses benefit from reduced turnover, increased morale, and importantly, workforce attachment. At a time when we know a lot of businesses are scrambling to attract and retain talent, we firmly believe that having this system in place will help us to be more competitive and will help businesses keep the skilled workers they need to grow their businesses. It also Maryland's program also has special rules regarding small businesses. So it really tries to help level the playing field because we know a lot of smaller employers want to offer these benefits to their workers, but they might struggle to do so because they have a lot of other demands. And so our program has specific provisions for small business, which the team will talk about. And of course, for workers, right? Leave insurance provides stable income so workers can take care of themselves or a family member when they have a serious medical condition. And again, with the incredibly low unemployment rate we have in Maryland, we need to make sure as many workers as possible are staying in our labor force. We believe that and finally, I'll say, is good for our economy, right? We need to keep that competitive edge in our state with engaging the highly skilled labor force that we do have here. So, I'll turn it over to our Assistant Secretary for Family, Elliot Skur, but I just want to say thank you. I know you have a lot of questions. Really appreciate the active way in which the Chamber has been engaging in this dialogue, and keep your questions and suggestions coming. Elliot?
Thanks so much, Secretary Wu, and thanks, Andrew, for hosting us. We're really excited to get down to the details and share the information we can. I want to echo something that Secretary Wu said. I know there is a lot of uncertainty about how this program will be rolled out, and I hope what we can do today is alleviate some of that uncertainty and be upfront about places where we need to do a better job of clarifying and communicating with the employer community in Maryland. So we really appreciate the opportunity to get to talk to you today. We can move to the first slide here, and I just want to level set and give a high-level agenda about how we want to alleviate some of that uncertainty, and then Regan and I can go back and forth. We have a few slides, but we want to dedicate the bulk of this session to answering your specific questions. We've dedicated a large portion of this hour to just getting into the details with what's important to you. So our slides are just going to cover three basic things at a high level. What is FAMLI? How does it work? And particularly, how does it work for businesses in Maryland? And third, what can you do now? And what are the next steps for implementing this program? So I'll turn it over to Regan for a couple slides, and then we'll go back and forth.
Thanks, Elliot. I'm Regan Vaughn. I'm the Director of Policy for the FAMLI program. And the basic underlying principle of FAMLI is that all workers in Maryland who meet the eligibility requirements will be able to, one, take time away from work when they need to care for themselves or a family member. While they are away from work, they will receive job protection, and they'll be able to earn wage replacement of up to $1,000 a week for 12 weeks in the year. And so those are the broad strokes and principles around our FAMLI program and everything that will feed up into it and around it. Sorry. So the life events that are covered by FAMLI should be recognizable to many of you who have dealt with FMLA. They very closely track the FMLA life events. The first being the employee's own serious health condition. If an employee has their own serious health condition, they'll be able to apply for FAMLI. The second is caring for a family member who has their own serious health condition. Third is welcoming a child into their home, whether it's through adoption, foster care, or birth. And then finally, the fourth prong of FMLA, which is preparing for a family member's military deployment. And so while FAMLI does not perfectly align with FMLA, it does track in many of the cases, and the life events is really one of those big areas where it tracks. In terms of who's going to be eligible for benefits, a worker's eligibility triggers once they have worked 680 hours in a position that is localized in Maryland. And that 680 hours has to be over a 12-month period. So most workers are going to qualify for this or are going to quickly qualify for this. That's about 17 weeks of full-time work. The only group that is not automatically included in FAMLI are self-employed individuals. But they will be able to elect to participate and to enroll in the program with certain requirements around that. But the program really is open to all workers in Maryland. We have some key dates. The first was we just reached October 1 of 2023. We established what the contribution rate is for the first 14 months of the program. And that rate was set at 0.9% of payroll. We'll talk a little bit later about how that gets split for the different employment groups. But that rate is intended to create a self-sufficient program where administrative costs, benefit costs are all covered by the contribution rate, that there aren't general fund or other state dollars running into the program. In early 2024, the division will release regulations, setting up the basic rules and guidelines for the program. We have been diligently working on crafting those regulations and have tried to take a really collaborative, transparent approach to putting them together. We hosted 7 stakeholder meetings. We have issued I think it's 13 public documents asking for comment and discussion. The chamber has been right there with us at all of those meetings, offering comment and letting us know and shape the program, giving us advice and pushing us in different directions on how to get those regulations done. Contributions into the program are set to start October 1 of 2024. That is when the payroll deduction from employees will begin and when the costs due to the state will start accruing. What we've floated in the regulation drafts we've put out is that it would be a quarterly reporting. So probably in January of 2025 would be when those contributions are first due on wages earned during the quarter starting October 1, 2024. And then once the fund is seeded, benefits will begin. And that is slated for January 1 of 2026. And so beginning on that date is when employees will be able to apply for both the benefit, but also the job protections that come with that. Elliot, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Regan. So I want to zoom out for the next 2 slides and just look at the bigger picture about how family in Maryland fits into the larger picture, both at the national level and with other laws at the federal level and the state level. And then I'll zoom in on one key aspect of that. So the important thing that I want to point out here is that Maryland is able to be the beneficiary of learning from 10 other states that have gone down this road before. We are able to learn from other states about best practices, what has worked, and most importantly, what hasn't worked. And so I want to give people the expectations that we're able to make Maryland a efficient and well-administered program because we have a lot of existing programs to learn from. Moving on to the next slide, one of the other things to situate Maryland family within is the larger federal context. And I want to take a moment to compare family with the FMLA. There are lots of overlapping letters in these 2 laws, and I think it's important to separate out some of the important differences. Regan pointed out some very important similarities between the FMLA and FAMLI in Maryland, but there are some important differences, and those are the ones that I want to draw out right now. Of course, the biggest difference is that family is a state law and FMLA is a federal law. And the other biggest important difference is that FMLA provides unpaid job protected leave for events that are similar to family, whereas family provides money, benefits to workers for taking time off for similar events. Another important difference is that family in Maryland is available to workers who have worked 680 hours anywhere in the state. It doesn't have to be with their current employer, whereas the FMLA covers workers only when they've been with their current employer for a certain amount of time. Family, as Regan pointed out, covers all employers in Maryland, with the possible exception of self-employed individuals. But as a general matter, everyone in Maryland, everyone who works in Maryland is covered by family. The FMLA covers a subset of workers in Maryland and a subset of workers nationwide because of higher criteria for determining which employers are covered by the FMLA. And finally, family, because benefits are paid under the family program, whereas FMLA is unpaid, there are contributions that are made to a centralized trust fund under family, whereas FMLA does not have any contribution requirement. And so on that last note, moving on to the next slide, after zooming out and talking about the bigger picture, I want to zoom in on one crucial aspect of family, which is the I in FAMLI. One of the most unique things about family is that it is structured as insurance. It is not a mandate on employers to pay up to 12 weeks of leave for someone to be out on leave. We know that doing so would impose a great amount of uncertainty in planning for finances for businesses and employers. And so one of the great advantages about the structure of the FAMLI program, FAMLI, is that it transfers that risk of uncertainty about knowing when or not knowing when an employee is going to go out for potentially up to 12 weeks. It transfers that uncertainty and from a financial aspect to a third party. And if we move on to the next slide, we can talk about what those third parties are. So by default, all employers will be automatically enrolled in what we're calling the state plan. The state plan, this default option, has a number of advantages. The biggest one is that it is seamless and automatic. There's nothing additional that employers need to do to be in compliance with the state plan. The state plan will automatically collect contributions from employers who correctly report their wages. The state plan will act as an insurer in processing applications from employees, reviewing those applications, and issuing benefits to workers. But in addition to the state plan, employers do have options, and we know that options are important to businesses and employers in the state. A couple other advantages of the state fund. Employers and employees share the cost. Regan mentioned that we have set the contribution rate for the state fund at 0.9% of covered wages up to the Social Security wage base. That is split 50-50. This is by default, 50-50 between employers and employees. So employers and workers each will contribute 0.45% of wages. Small employers, meaning employers with 14 or fewer workers, only have to collect and remit contributions from their employees. There is no requirement for small employers to pay their 0.45% share to the state fund. Self-employed individuals can optionally participate at 0.9%. And one other point on this slide that we want to emphasize is that it is an option for employers to cover their workers' share of contributions to the FAMLI program if they desire. I think Regan and I have been surprised going around the state about the interest of employers to offer what could be a new benefit to their employees by covering the portion of their workers' contributions. But that is not a mandatory thing that employers have to offer. By default, employers it is expected that many employers will share the cost of this program 50-50 with their employees, and that is allowed under the state plan. But as I mentioned, we know it is important that employers have options. So in addition to a default option that is available to employers to automatically and seamlessly be in compliance with this program, employers who want to pursue alternative options are able to do so. And they can do so in two ways. They can offer an approved commercial insured product, which means negotiating with an insurance company and buying an approved insurance product that is accredited by the Department of Labor and the Maryland Insurance Administration. And doing so will allow the employer to come to an arrangement with that private insurer and not have to contribute to the state fund. So that is one option. Another option, mostly targeted at larger employers, is the ability to self-insure, which means to set up your own pooled trust to which you make regular contributions from your employees and out of your general employer assets into a self-insured trust, and benefits will be paid out of that self-insured trust. We're happy to go into more details if people have specific questions about these alternative options. We will be releasing many more very specific details in 2024, as noted on the slide, but we're also happy to dive into the details today if people have questions at the end of the presentation.
The secretary covered many of these benefits, but I do want us to bring back. Family often is seen as a benefit for employees, and there are definitely benefits for employees under a family program. But there are, looking at other states in the studies that have come out from the states that preceded us, there are a lot of benefits also for employers and for the economy as a whole. Elliot talked earlier about the greater cost predictability, that this is an insurance program, that when someone needs the time away, their wage replacement is done through the insurance program. Businesses don't have to pay for that. We've seen a lot of studies that talk about reduced turnover and boosted morale among the workforce, that when they know they can take time and are able to take time, it's better internally for a business. Along with that, increased productivity and also workforce attachment. A lot of the studies coming out have focused specifically on the parental leave portion of family, and in the states that have seen a greater workforce attachment of women, particularly young women who stay in the workforce after having a child. And then also hearing from small businesses already that they want to be able to offer some type of paid family leave, and just within their budgets haven't been able to do it on their own. In the commercial insurance market hasn't been able to provide something that is affordable at this point. And so we're hoping to help level that playing field so a small business can compete with a large multi-state corporation in offering this type of benefit package. And then also the plan was designed with employer flexibility, as Elliot discussed, that while the state plan is there as a default, there are other options for how to deliver this benefit. It is not a one size fits all. So as we get ready for launch, we want to talk about a few things you can start doing now. The first is to start thinking about which plan option might make sense for your business. Is it the state plan? Is it looking at commercial products? Is it the self-insured option? What makes sense for your business and your employees? The second is we have a growing email list. The link to our website is in the second bullet. And to sign up to hear from us, to hear when we put out a request for comment, or to find out what's going on with family. We encourage you to be on our mailing list so that you're the first to know when decisions are released or when we're seeking input. The third is to start building contributions into your budget planning. They will go live October of 2024. And to be prepared for that next year. And finally, we have a roadshow right now. We like going out, whether it's virtual or meeting with groups, to raise awareness about the program, to talk about the program. And on our website, there's a link to fill out an event request, to ask us to come talk to a group. To present family both informationally, but also so we can help receive feedback. And so we encourage you to do that. And then I am going to put Andrew on the spot a little bit. We have a fifth option that is just being released this week. We are ready to do our first round of user research on our IT system. And we are working with a group that is going to start interviewing some businesses for us to help give us a basic idea of what people want in a system, how you interact with government systems, what makes the most sense. And so we have a survey that we'll be sending out where people can sign up to let us know if they'd be interested in talking to us as we set up that user research. So we will share that link with the chamber to help get out. We'll also send it out through our mailing list, but to watch for that, because we really genuinely want to get as much input as we can, because we know this program isn't going to work unless all of our stakeholders feel comfortable using the systems and with the rules. So we're trying to set them up to do that, to make it so there's easy use, so it makes sense, and so family can be successful in Maryland. Our contact information is here, the link to our website. And we are ready to take questions, and thank you for the time this morning to let us present on FAMLI.
Of course, thanks, Regan. Elliot, appreciate the quick overview. And again, for everyone watching, this recording will be available. So if you didn't write Elliot or Regan's contact information down, you can go back and find it, or just Google them, and I'm sure you can find it easily enough. So what we'll do is we'll segue into questions, and I let you guys know I have a list of like the FAQs that I get most often from businesses about this program. There's definitely some overlap with some of the questions I think that are kind of coming in already. So what I will do, Hannah, I know you're monitoring the questions. I continue to encourage those on to please submit questions. I'm going to run through some of the questions I have here, and then as we kind of answer some of those that have already been asked, we'll move from to there. So, and I wrote a couple down while you're kind of while you're running through the presentation. One on business size we do get often as to how you all are going to calculate what the size of the business. Obviously, for those that are on the cusp of, well, I have 15 now, I didn't have 15 before, where does that fall? So I think, is your plan to use average number of employees over the previous 12 months? How are you guys going to determine business size?
Yeah, so what we included in the draft regulatory outline that was out for comment was that we asked this question, whether it should be a 12-month average. And really what we heard back was yes, a 12-month average. We will ask how many employees were on payroll each quarter. Okay. That will be reported anyways through wage and hour reports. Right. And then do an average of the 4 quarters to determine whether or not someone meets that threshold of under 15.
Perfect. I know that we did receive a question about this in the chat, and it kind of works out. So it's kind of 2 pieces. It's like the portability, but also what employees qualify. And I think the question we get most often is someone who lives in another state. So I'm going to kind of roll out the variations of this question that we get, right? Someone who lives in another state and maybe works in Maryland, a Maryland location. Conversely, someone who maybe is a Maryland resident but works in another state. And then obviously we're getting, as you would imagine, a lot of questions about remote workers, someone who works here remotely for an employer out of state. How are kind of each of those categories treated as far as whether or not that employee is eligible for the FAMLI program, and then obviously the requirements on the employer?
Sure. So for an incredibly complicated issue, we are trying to make it as simple as possible. And the first baseline answer is, where is the position located? The bill does not cover necessarily Maryland residents. It's Maryland workers. So if you have someone who lives in West Virginia and is coming over to Garrett County and their job is 100% in Garrett County, they are a Maryland worker. Okay. If someone lives in Garrett County and travels to West Virginia every day for work, they are not a Maryland worker under the framework that we have out right now. Okay. So it really is based on location. Okay. Now we get lots of questions about what if remote workers, multiple states, and for that, what we put out in our discussion documents and got a lot of feedback on was using the unemployment insurance rules. Okay. And is that where we should look, because employers are familiar with the localization concepts. The federal government's put out a lot of guidance on it. We have existing state guidance on it. And so, again, no regulations have been published, but that is where our head has gone, is to try to not reinvent the wheel with a new set of complicated rules.
That's helpful. And, obviously the way I'm going to ask my questions I'm trying to, for those on the line, to give them as much, for a business trying to prepare for the program, right? How should they begin to think of who's qualifying and who is not? And so I think that that's really helpful. If you're a business and you have a remote worker who would qualify, generally what we're saying here for Maryland unemployment insurance, they're probably going to qualify under this program if they're remote. And then, where the position is located for the other issues. So thank you for that. On the contribution rate, I know you talked about kind of the split. The rate is set at 0.9%, shared 50-50 for those with 15 or more. I think what is really important that employers need to know is that the onus, right, is on the employer to remit that contribution. And so it is the responsibility of the employer, and that's who you all will be holding accountable to make sure that the contributions are made, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I think that is really important for people to understand. Another question we get often right before the passage of this program is very common for businesses to carry some level of disability insurance to cover part and parcel of a lot of these items that FAMLI is going to cover. And so I think a question we get often is, is there any reason for an employer to continue to carry, let's say, short-term disability? What will this program do, right, for those that do have short-term disability and offer those benefits currently? Is this kind of like a replacement for that? Is it kind of, there may be instances where employers continue to carry both? I don't know if you all have contemplated that.
Yeah, so I think this is definitely similar to a short-term disability. The benefit calculation is different than most short-term disability policies. I think the typical short-term disability policy probably covers 60% of someone's salary. It could be a little more, it could be a little less, but that seems to be the general rule of thumb. Under FAMLI, it is a sliding scale where the lowest wage workers could get up to 90% of their wage, but it caps out at $1,000 a week. Yeah. So your higher wage workers could actually end up with a lower benefit than they would have under a traditional short-term disability policy. So the framing has been that FAMLI is primary. That is the first benefit, but that short-term disability policies could be used as wraparound if you want to continue to provide it to bring your employees closer to 100% or up to 100% of their salary. So we don't think we're putting the short-term disability industry out of business with FAMLI. And I suspect that policies are going to be developed to offer that wraparound service.
Okay. Thank you for that. We often get asked the question about tax implications. What, if any, are tax implications for people receiving this benefit? I don't know that I have. I would just make the assumption that yes, there's a level of tax on the benefits. I'm assuming that is the case. That's just one we get often.
Elliot, you want to jump in on that one?
Sure. Yeah.
That's a more complicated question than I probably would just assume the answer, I'm guessing.
Yeah, not at all. It is a complicated question and one that we need to work on with the taxing authorities. What I will say for employers is that any tax implications that flow from benefit receipt will not be the responsibility of employers. Benefits are being paid by the state or by a third party, such as an insurance company, and tax implications on the individual receiving those benefits are the individual's responsibility and not the employer's responsibility. There is a contributions piece, as we've covered before. Part of the contributions come from the pay of workers if there's a deduction, and so there is a tax implication on the front end that employers, similar to the way that they handle payroll withholding, already for employers and for their employees, that will continue because employers are allowed to deduct a portion of the contributions from their pay of their employees, and that has tax implications for payroll withholding. So that is what employers and third-party administrators will need to pay attention to. But in terms of benefit receipt, there's not a role for employers or a responsibility or an expectation that employers have any responsibility for handling any of that.
Okay, thank you. So I want to go back. I mentioned about we often hear that the program is portable, right? So once you discussed kind of what, in order to qualify, someone has to have worked 680 hours over the previous 12 months to qualify. And so that once a worker qualifies for the program, correct, they can, let's say, leave a job with employer A, take a new job and go to employer B. And since so far as that they have qualified, they're able to use those benefits immediately, whether they are with employer A or employer B, correct?
Correct.
I think that that's a really important distinction that employers need to be aware of. A question we also received in the same vein is, has there been any thought given to the instance where someone does takes the benefit and takes the leave, comes back, right? In this instance, an employer has held a spot open and then, let's say, were to resign from the job. I don't know if that issue has been contemplated at all on your all end. It is a concern we hear often, as you would imagine, particularly smaller businesses, as to kind of what, if any, recourse or redress they have in that scenario, or they're just kind of, I'm going to use the term left holding the bag, but you know what I mean.
That's
a difficult question, hard to contemplate, but one that a concern and a question we get often is, really where does that, is there an outlet for the employer at that point? But
at this point, no, that's not contemplated by the statute and hasn't been something we've dealt with regulations. We are looking at how we define employee and whether someone has to be currently employed to receive the benefit. I think an argument for not requiring current employment to receive the benefit is to avoid that situation. If they know they're not going to come back, then they don't have to stay employed to continue receiving the benefit.
Got it.
So that is one way to avoid that situation, is to allow people who have the 680 hours, but then have this life event, so they can't look for new employment. They would be able to receive the benefit. And I think that could help prevent the situation you just described, where they stay with the employer only to receive the benefit. That would not be a requirement.
And I would just add, I understand the impact of holding the job open, and I do recognize that is an implication for employers. The one consolation and the one difference with something like just a mandate for employers to pay 12 weeks of salary is that the 12 weeks of benefits are not being paid directly out of the employer's payroll. They're being paid through a third party. And so the case where someone receives up to 12 weeks of benefits from the third party and then leaves, those 12 weeks of holding the job open were not subject to payroll from the employer. So I think that is one consolation. I know some employers that have voluntarily established parental leave policies that are paid have some kind of retention provision that says you have to pay this back unless you stay in the job for 6 months after you return. That would be allowed under voluntary programs, but under the family program, that provision is not in place. But the advantage being that the state or a third party is actually paying for those 12 weeks of payroll wage replacement.
Thanks for that. In the same line of questioning on, someone qualifying for the program, I think, and this is kind of a specific situation, but as you imagine, we do hear it from certain areas of the state and in certain industries for people who do have a level of seasonal employment, whether that be hospitality, restaurants, think Ocean City or think Garrett County, for example, or those maybe in the agricultural sector who hire people for, let's say, harvest seasons. Have those types of situations been contemplated? I mean, I know that we have issues with other programs that exist in this area as well. And I don't know whether any idea as to how to specifically address that. I don't know if that's been contemplated by you all or not. And I'll give an example. Again, maybe overly specific, but a question we do receive in the agricultural industry. If someone is bringing someone, let's say an H-2A or H-2B worker over here, and they're working for a season, they're then going home, likely coming back the next season as well, as many times how that program works. Is it possible that that could happen? They could qualify for a benefit, come up here for a following season, and then be able to utilize those benefits, and not be there for the purpose that in this case maybe the farmer would have been required to pay to have them brought up here, house them, fed them, all those type things. And so just a unique circumstance. I guess my question being, has that been contemplated, or is that something kind of down the road you guys are thinking about?
I think it's definitely something we can look more at. Yeah. I mean, they would still need to have the 680 hours within the most recent 12 months. So if it depends on how long the season is, whether the year before is going to count for them to immediately qualify. And then they obviously would have to prove there actually was a life event as well. I mean, there's going to be certification requirements. So I think it would end up having to be a perfect storm situation. But it's definitely something we can explore more.
Yep. Yeah. And I think part of it also goes to your earlier question, Andrew, about that got into the question of being currently employed. And I think there is an open question about a seasonal worker for whom there's no expectation of returning to the same employer. I mean, there may be an informal agreement or just kind of an informal expectation, but not actually any documented thing that says this person is going to be continuously employed through at the end of the season through the beginning of next season, but they're just going to have zero payroll. Versus this person's term of working with us has ended. And I think it's an open question and heard loud and clear based on our earlier conversation about what is the line between being currently employed and not employed, and how does someone's benefits during that period of non-employment or quasi-employment, how is our benefits available to them? One other kind of category are schools. I know there may be private schools on the call. Summer break and winter break is a conversation that comes up a lot. The difference there is that there usually is a reasonable assurance of returning to work, and that's why many teachers are not eligible for unemployment insurance during break periods, because they have a reasonable assurance of returning to a job. So I think there are kind of important differences that we need to flesh out and make clear in our forthcoming guidance about how those situations are different and how benefits might or might not be eligible for someone to receive during that period between seasons.
Thanks, Elliot. The next item, I'm going to kind of ask it in a broad way. I'm going to ask you to kind of explain out, I think, for those on the call, the responsibilities, the notification requirements. I think is really important of what is required of employers for notice to employees about the program, when they're eligible for the program, XYZ, and then vice versa. If you could explain what notification requirements are required of the employee, it would be helpful as well. And this is obviously stemming from, and Regan, we've talked about this, but the difference between when leave is foreseen, right? I know that maybe I'm going to have to take my mother to a doctor's appointment and I'm going to apply for that benefit. I'm going to be out that day, versus maybe, you're in a car crash, something happened that you did not foresee. I think there's concern, we hear often on the employer side, that because there is some level of responsibility on the employer to make sure that the employee knows they're eligible for benefits, that if they don't receive some level of notice, adequate notice that someone is out for a particular reason, how can they be reasonably expected to also meet those notification requirements that they have to deliver? And so if you wouldn't mind just kind of explaining that out, some of the basics, I would appreciate it for those on the call.
Sure. So for the employer notification of employees, there are 3 triggers to notify. The first is upon hire. So whatever orientation you send someone to for a day and give them a stack of papers, notification must be included in that. There's an annual notification requirement. And then also if the employer finds out the employee may need the leave, announce someone's pregnant or expecting a child, or I need time off to take care of my mom. That should trigger for the employer to say, hey, do you know you participate in this family program? You should look into it. So those are the 3 main triggers. We are still developing the templates, the rules, what that looks like. But under the statute, those are the 3 time periods that the employer has a responsibility to notify. The employee notification section has probably gotten more thought from my team than anything else, because it's not written to require that the state require the employee to notify their employer. It is written that the employer can require notification. And it tracks FMLA, that the employer can require an employee to give 30 days notice. I believe it's, 30 or 60.
30 days for
30 days, 30 days for foreseen leave, or as soon as practicable for unforeseen leave. And from an administrative standpoint, we are trying to figure out how to administrate it when it has that employer discretion within it. That's really the only part of the bill, or I'm sorry, the statute that has employer discretion in there. But there is that requirement that employers can require that the leave, that there be notice given from the employee to the employer. Obviously this program is not going to be successful if employees aren't notifying employers of what's going on. We realize that, we want to encourage it. There's also an affirmative duty on the department to keep employers informed. So there are a number of triggers where we have to be in communication with the employer when a claim is filed, when a determination is made on the claim, if an appeal is filed, if there's any change to the claim. We also have to stay in notice, provide notice to the employer. So I think there are a lot of different intersections when that can happen. And again, through this process, we are really trying to think through what's workable on all sides, to make sure employers are getting what they need when they need it. But also that a lost piece of paper doesn't prevent someone from getting benefits. And trying to figure out the best way to set those processes up for businesses who aren't the same, who have different HR capabilities, in different systems. So that's something we're paying a lot of attention to.
And I will just say, and Elliot, I'm sure you have more to add, but the only point I will make, I think it's important, something that you said, and I think the question that we get often is, of the 3 kind of triggers for employer notification, that final piece, if it is truly that, the employer is notifying the employee, hey, you're eligible for these benefits when they become aware, I think that that's really important. I think the concern is that, can an employer be held responsible for, let's say, they were not aware that this person would have been eligible for the benefit, but the department saying, hey, you didn't tell them, and an employer saying, well, I didn't know because they did not let me know. And I think that's the concern. So if we're able to kind of make sure, dig in and say, if when the employer finds out, they have a, some level of responsibility to then notify them. I think that that's acceptable, but it's kind of that like gray area of walking the line that how do we make sure this kind of works and people aren't kind of getting jammed up. So.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Andrew. And I want to emphasize, just to level set and take a step back, that the ultimate goal here is to make sure that workers in Maryland can take paid leave when they need it. We don't want workers to have to choose between a paycheck and caring for their family. So that's the ultimate goal here. The ultimate goal is not to be punitive against employers for minor missteps. And so the primary remedy for something like that would be allow the employee to get payment from the division when they do learn about the program. I think what we know from the other state experiences, which I talked about earlier, is that the best way to get the information out to employees is because of the strong relationship that employees have with their employers. And it's so directed and pointed when someone says, I'm pregnant, like, what do I do? When in doubt, pass it out. It's like, here's this thing. I don't know if you're eligible or not. It's complicated. I'm speaking as an employer here. Like, you don't need to know all of the ins and outs about the complicated eligibility requirements, but this thing exists. Here we go. And what that looks like is a one-page document that will be available for employers on our website. It's there. You don't need to reinvent and find some well-crafted language to describe what this program is and that someone might be eligible. What we're just asking employers to do is hand out, either virtually or in paper, but it can just be an email, this thing, a PDF that's created by the department and is just given out to employers. So I think that's like very specifically like just what the ask is like, hand out this thing that's already created. You don't need to write your own thing. There isn't some complicated, like you have to craft an email with like very HR specific language, just hand out this thing. And then the other benefit of that I want to emphasize is one of the innovative things that we're thinking about is we can mention some options that are available to employers about requirements that employers can establish for notice requirements from their employees. And we recognize that it's very important for employers and employees to have an open line of communication at all times. And so what we're thinking about is on this required document that we are going to create as a department and make it kind of a template so that employers who want to exercise that ability to require an employee to give them notice can check a box or indicate on this notice, I need you to give me 30 days. This is my requirement as an employer. And it's just, they don't need to craft a policy and put that in a policy book. It's just built into the notice that's being already delivered, as Regan mentioned, is required to be delivered to employees. So we're trying to think about ways to make this as simple and streamlined as possible for employers and just get it right to the 10-yard line and just let employers like just get it to the end zone. That's kind of what I'm thinking about it.
No, it's very, very helpful. So I literally think I could keep you guys on here asking questions for like 4 hours. So I have one more question I want to ask. And then Hannah, I'll pick like one or two of the most common questions I think that we're probably getting to the Q&A. And then, we'll kind of wrap up, but, contributions begin October 1 of 24, right? We know that. And I think what comes along with that, right, is employers are expected in some sense, right? I think there's a little bit of flexibility here, right? But to be making a decision generally by that time frame as to whether they want to participate in the state program, whether they maybe want to pursue a private option, or if they want to self-insure, they want to self-fund. So that October 1 date is kind of when we would say, hey, as a business, you need to have thought about this because contributions generally are going to begin. What has been contemplated on your end? Because I know there's discussion about maybe, a business decides to go into the state program at first because they haven't quite made the decision, but hey, 6 months from then, they found a good product on the private market that they maybe want to do. They want to, what are the options there? If premiums that they maybe paid into the state program, are they able to get those reimbursed or not? Vice versa, let's say also with the employee contributions that they were paying into the state program, they're now employers going to a private option. Kind of what are the dates there for decision making for employers, and then kind of what's being contemplated as to how much time do they have to really make that hard decision of this is my choice?
Sure. So we don't have firm dates to give you right now. It's the second most popular thing in my office to talk about right now is figuring this piece out. We can basically guarantee insurance products are not going to be ready by October 1, 2024. And that they have to be built around regulations. They have to be approved by the Maryland Insurance Administration. Mm-hmm. So we've really looked to what other states have done, and many of the states that have come online in the past 5 to 6 years have had a declaration of intent process where you let the department know what you think you are going to do. Mm-hmm. And so we are trying to set up and craft the rules around that and what the timeline would be to let us know what you think you want to do. What we floated in our regulations outline that we released was that we would still ask employers to collect employee contributions and their own contributions and hold it in an escrow account. So that if they did come into the state plan, that money was already collected to pay what they missed because they had let us know they thought they were going to go with a private plan. So we are working on what that process will be. It'll probably be around June, early summer, where the actual declaration of intent will be available for businesses to look at and fill out and start telling us that they do not want to participate in the default state plan. If we do not hear from a business, the assumption is they will go with the state plan.
Got it.
We have not issued any guidance or consideration on what happens if you start paying into the state plan and leave it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you want to jump in on that, Elliot. That's not.
Yeah, I'll just add. I mean, I think our goal is to make compliance as seamless and automatic as possible. Mm-hmm. Employers don't have to do anything before October 1, 2024 if they don't want to. But the other side of that is we know options are important and we want employers to have flexibility when they want to exercise it. We know this is complicated. This offers a lot of new options and choices that employers have to make, and we know that can be overwhelming. So we want the default option to be super simple and seamless. Options are available. And I think also in your question, Andrew, was like, well, what if we change our mind? We also want to build in procedures so that employers can change their minds beyond 2026. Like there's a lot of transition things that can get sticky and complicated, but I think we also want to set up a program that's going to last in the future. Mm-hmm. And we want it to be flexible so that employers can make different choices. They can go with an insurance company, they can go with a different insurance company, they can go with a state plan. And we want them to be able to have and exercise those options going forward. And that's what we're trying to maximize on.
Anna, do you have a quick question? Is there a quick one?
Yeah, we have received a ton of questions. Thank you all for submitting them. I want to be cognizant of everybody's time and labor's time. So as Andrew stated in the beginning, we will make sure that labor has all of these questions to review. We do encourage outreach to the department too. It's important that they hear from you all. I know an hour of time isn't enough to get all of your questions answered. But a question that I've seen come in a lot and that we've also been asked is how, will there be some sort of portal? How will the employer connect with the department and be as involved as they can be with securely receiving and sending information and updates on their employees' benefits request and application?
You all need guinea pigs for your system, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna find some.
That's a great plug, Andrew. We would love to have people's input. I think all of the functionality that you listed, Hannah, is exactly the kinds of things we want to hear from employers about what you want to see in the interface, in the digital interface that you have with our office, visibility into employees' claims, what you want to see for payroll contributions, how to make that easy. These are things that we want your feedback on, and we will have some detailed guidance about how to participate with us on that. So I'll leave it at that for now. We'll have more information on that coming, but I do also want to just echo what Andrew and Hannah said. We are available to answer your questions. I did see a lot of very good questions come through the Q&A about corporate structure and private plans and payroll reporting. These are things that we want to answer and work with you on. So please reach out. Regan shared our contact information. You can reach out to us directly or through Andrew if you want, and Andrew can get in touch with us and we can give you detailed answers to those questions.
Thanks, Elliot and Regan. And to those that are currently on, and I know we're 2 minutes past and I want to wrap up here soon, but there are a ton of good questions. So I think maybe what we will do, and this is work for both of us, it's not just putting work on the department, but we will organize this list of questions that we have that are unanswered, and we will send them to you all. And if we could get, like preliminary answers to some of the top items, we can share that back out with all the participants. So at least someone who had a burning question that we didn't get to, we can get that answered. If something, requires more thought and digging, we can work on that later. But I think at first blush should be great. So Elliot, Regan, we really appreciate your time. Obviously, this program is very big, not only for the business community, but obviously also for Maryland's workforce. It's a large policy, it's a large program, and so please continue to use us as a resource as well. And we appreciate you guys being so open with working with us. So for those on the call, the Chamber will be releasing our 2024 legislative priorities document in the next few weeks. So be on the lookout for that. Otherwise, I appreciate your time today, and go enjoy your lunch. I'm standing in between people and lunch. So otherwise, thanks everybody. Thank you.